This brief presentation outlines factors that should be considered when choosing target variables for assessment and intervention. In his text, Shapiro outlined 7 assumptions about academic assessment that should be considered when selecting target variables. It's important that the target variables you select for measuring the behavior and to target for intervention should not violate any of the following assumptions. As a side note, these assumptions were developed by Shapiro and Dr. Lentz, your instructor for ABA and ABA 2. First, it's important that your assessment reflects the behavior in the natural environment. So if there's a problem with the student's behavior during reading time, that's the time that you would go in to observe the problem behavior. Similarly, if we're talking about problems with reading skills, we would not only do some pull-out examinations where the student's asked to read to a stranger in a different environment, but we'd also look at permanent products in the classroom and how do they perform with materials that are similar to the actual materials used in the classroom. Research on curriculum-based measurement has found some differences depending on who gives an assessment and where it happens. So we want to make sure that what we're capturing is the student's actual performance, how they're doing in school with the tasks that they're being asked to perform in the regular environment. The next assumption is that assessment should be idiographic rather than nomothetic. That is, we want to compare the student's performance to their own performance rather than only comparing it to a normative sample. The comparisons between a student's performance and a normative sample are important for giving a context and may be used in eligibility decisions when we're talking about special education. However, what's really important is that the student's making gains. So we want to be able to see how did they perform yesterday, how are they performing today or tomorrow or next week. So idiographic refers to making those comparisons to the student's own performance. A big myth out there in education is that we shouldn't teach to the test. The reality is teaching to the test is good when your test assesses the skills and behaviors you want your students to demonstrate. There should be an overlap between the curriculum and what you're testing. What is taught and expected to be learned should be what is tested. It would be unfair, for example, in this course, for me to provide you an assessment on things I don't cover or don't provide you reading materials on. That wouldn't make any sense. There needs to be an alignment between the instructional objectives and materials that are used and then how they are assessed. We also want our assessment methods to be linked to interventions. So we need to be able to use the results from our assessment to guide us toward intervention solutions. If there's no link between the results that you get and possible intervention ideas, then the assessment is really useless. So it needs to be specific enough and targeting important areas that then lead to intervention solutions. Another extremely important quality of target variables is that they are appropriate for continuous progress monitoring of student performance. We need to be able to collect data regularly to see if instruction is effective, if intervention is needed, if intervention is effective, and make changes as necessary. Measures that can only be administered once a year, once every 3 years, are not going to be helpful for intervention planning. We also want our results from assessments to be helpful in making a lot of different types of decisions. So we've talked about screening in the context of response to intervention, where we collect data on all of our students to then identify students who may need further intervention at Tier 2. We also want to make decisions further up the chain about eligibility. If the supports the students receiving are really intensive and requiring a lot of additional resources, then we may say that they need special education services. We can use data to broadly assess how our system is performing as a whole. So we look at our universal screening data not only to say these students need further intervention, but also to evaluate our curriculum. So again, remember at Tier 1, it's expected that 80 to 90% of our students would be successful. If it turns out only 50% of our students are successful with the curriculum, then that suggests not a need for further intervention for all those students, but rather a reevaluation of our curriculum. Finally, we use measures that have sound technical properties. So this speaks to the reliability and the validity of the instruments. So we want to use assessment measures that have research support that shows that they are helpful and useful for making decisions and monitoring student progress. This week you will review another slideshow that discusses reliability and validity in more detail. Given these 7 assumptions of academic assessment and also other information in the literature about target variable selection, here are some keys. First, we want to make sure the measures we use are sensitive to small increments of change. So we're talking about being able to monitor student progress from week to week. So we need instruments that are sensitive to the growth that we could expect week to week, which is going to be small. Second, we want our measures to reflect improvement in core academic areas. So we are looking at reading, math, writing as critical academic areas that affect overall academic achievement. Next, whatever we're measuring, whatever that target behavior is, it needs to be an important part of learning objectives. There has to be some social validity. Does the teacher, does the parent, does the student, does society view these behaviors as being important? The behavior also needs to be linked to both short and long-term positive outcomes. So targets that we're going to talk about this quarter, including reading fluency, math computation fluency, are shown to be linked to long-term academic achievement outcomes. And beyond that, things like graduating from high school, going on to college, having a successful career. In addition, as much as you can, you want to choose keystone targets. A keystone behavior is a pivotal behavior that once you change it, you'll see positive collateral effects in other behaviors. For example, if we teach a student social skills, they are going to not only improve their social skills, but they also will have better peer interactions, which may result in more friends. They may be more engaged in school. We'll have better interactions with teachers who are now going to be more reinforcing. Other examples include reading fluency. We know if we improve reading fluency, not only will reading performance be enhanced, but think of all the other academic areas that are affected by reading skills. So now the student's going to be doing well or better in science, in social studies, and in math. We also want our targets to be things that can be significantly changed. So we're looking for things that the research suggests that if we provide instruction and intervention that we would see different outcomes. So this is in contrast to targeting something like IQ, which the research has shown to be fairly stable over time. We also want our target variables to be helpful for developing intervention plans. So if we collect data on a target, that then we can go to the research and find interventions that address that area. So all of the targets we go over this quarter, including reading fluency, writing production, total words written, math computation fluency, we can go to the research and find interventions targeting each of those variables. We also want to make sure that we're assessing both the academic environment and the individual's skills. So if there is a problem in math, we would get a sense of the student's skill level in math, but then also look to factors in the environment that led to that level of performance. So what does math instruction look like? What are the contingencies for accurate responding in math? How many opportunities is the student given to practice their math skills within the class and through homework? That information is very helpful for intervention planning. We'd also use functional hypotheses when necessary and possible, and this will be more the case when we're talking about behavior. But in the next slide, we'll talk about hypotheses for academic struggles. But when a student does demonstrate challenging behavior in the classroom, we would look to what are the variables that are maintaining those behaviors in the classroom, and also what may be setting the stage for the occurrence of those behaviors, and use that information to help guide intervention planning. Finally, we want the target to be something that can be reliably measured. And again, you're going to review another PowerPoint on reliability and validity, but in short, reliability refers to the consistency of measure. If I observe a student in the classroom and another person observes them at the same time and we're measuring the same target variable, our results should be similar. If they're not, our data are not reliable. Similarly, if I'm assessing a student's writing skills in the morning and someone else assesses them using the same measure an hour later, we should see similar results because the writing performance shouldn't improve or worsen dramatically in 1 hour. So we want our measures to be things that we can compare from one point to another and be confident that that it is reliable data. Although this course is focused on academic assessment, you really can't talk about academic assessment without thinking about what it means for intervention. And that's why when we talk about the keys to selecting appropriate targets, it was about things that we can measure repeatedly to evaluate interventions that will be linked to intervention ideas. So here, while we know of our functional hypotheses for behavior problems, here are some hypotheses for academic difficulties. So once we have our data about how a student is performing and we've documented that there is a skill deficit, we also look to the data we've collected about the academic environment to help us come up with some hypotheses. So here are potential ideas as to why the problem may be occurring. So one, they just don't want to do it. So the student is not being reinforced for accurate responding, so they're choosing not to engage in that behavior. Second, they may have not spent enough time doing it, so they have not had enough opportunities to develop the skill, practice the skill. Next, they may not have had enough help doing it, and this speaks to feedback. So maybe they are given lots of assignments in class or for homework, but they never get feedback as to the accuracy of their responses, so they continue to practice incorrect responses. Next, they have not had to do it that way before. And this speaks to that link between assessment and instruction or the curriculum. So if we assess students in a way that doesn't match how they've been asked to perform tasks before, we will see this mismatch. So we need to make sure that the curriculum and the materials that we're presenting are giving the opportunity to the student to learn the skill and demonstrate it the way we want to see it. Finally, it's too hard. There may be a mismatch between the student's skills and where they're placed in the curriculum. And because of that mismatch, they can't benefit from instruction. They need to be at the instructional level where they still haven't mastered everything, but they do have the basic skills needed to benefit from the current level of instruction. And if you use these hypotheses, you can help to develop an intervention from it. So for example, if a student didn't want to do the work, then we would change the contingencies for performance to provide more rewards for accurate responding or engaging in academic tasks. If they haven't spent enough time doing it, we provide them additional opportunities to practice the skills. If they haven't had enough help, we would make sure that they get extra feedback and that it's clear what is an accurate response and what is an incorrect response. They have not had to do it that way before. We want to modify curricular materials to make sure, again, they're providing the opportunities and teaching the students to demonstrate the skill the way that you would like to see it. And it's too hard. And here that just speaks to changing the curricular materials to make sure that they are at the instructional level. So if a student is in 4th grade and they're reading at the 1st grade level, we can't expect that they're going to benefit from instruction on that 4th grade material. So maybe that material needs to be moved down to, say, the 2nd grade level.